John Parker had consistently prioritized maintaining a harmonious lifestyle. He had established a secure career as a civil engineer at the age of 42, achieved moderate success, and established a comfortable home for his family in a tranquil suburban neighborhood. He was a man who prioritized integrity and dedication, and he instilled these values into his marriage to Lisa, his high school fiancée. Lisa Parker was a devout wife and mother at the age of 39. She was employed as a graphic designer on a part-time basis, managing her career while simultaneously caring for their sole child, Emily. Emily was a bright and accomplished adolescent at the age of 16, renowned for her close-knit relationship with both of her parents and her enthusiasm for music. The Parkers appeared to be the quintessential family. They participated in community events, organized barbecues, and embarked on family excursions. John had always considered himself fortunate to have a companion who provided him with support and a daughter who brought him pleasure. However, everything changed on a fateful evening. The night was brisk and clear, a sign of the impending winter. John had arrived home early from work, anticipating the opportunity to delight his family with a homemade supper. The aroma of his Stamus lasagna, which he had prepared using a recipe that had been handed down from his grandmother, accompanied him. He heard merriment emanating from the interior of the home as he approached the front door. Although it was a warm and inviting sound, there was something about it that caused him to pause. He was on the brink of opening the door when an abrupt commotion erupted. A conversation that is not audible captivated his interest. He pressed his ear against the door out of curiosity and a sense of something being awry. Initially, he was only able to discern indistinguishable conversation. However, he was able to hear Emily's voice distinctly, which was characterized by an enthusiastic tone. "Your boyfriend Johnson is exceptional, Mother. Your willingness to disclose him to me is greatly appreciated. He intends for you to participate in the subsequent occasion." John was struck by the words with the force of a sledgehammer. He felt an icy chill race down his spine, and his heart pounded violently. He had always suspected Lisa's increasing distance, but he had never anticipated such a betrayal. His mind was in a state of tumult as he endeavored to comprehend the information he had just heard. The flippant mention of Lisa participating left no room for doubt, and the reference to Johnson seemed to suggest a more intimate connection. John was taken aback as he staggered back from the door, the lasagna sliding from his grasp and shattering on the veranda. He was transfixed in astonishment, as if the world had collapsed around him. He abruptly turned on his heel and exited the residence without a glance back. He required an area to contemplate and to exhale. His thoughts were a tumultuous tempest of wrath, disbelief, and betrayal. John's departure was abrupt and unexplained. He left behind a note that simply stated, "I can't stay," and packed a suitcase with a few essentials. "I require time to resolve matters. I kindly request that you honor my privacy." He did not provide any information regarding his intended destination or anticipated return date. The house, which was once alive with merriment and warmth, was now ominously silent. Lisa was bewildered and devastated by John's disappearance over the course of the next few days. He was not to be located, despite her efforts to locate him. Their acquaintances and neighbors were equally bewildered, and rumors began to circulate regarding their abrupt and unexplained departure. Emily maintained her silence, as she was torn between her devotion to her parents and the embarrassment of her own actions. The weight of her remorse is causing her adolescent facade of confidence to crumble. John, on the other hand, had relocated to a modest rental cabin in the forests, a far cry from the life he had previously known. He spent his days in seclusion, attempting to reconcile himself with the shock and strategize his subsequent actions. The betrayal was so profound that it felt as though it would never recover. He was always a man of action, and he was aware in his heart that merely walking away was insufficient. John resolved to engage the services of a private investigator, Mark Turner, who was an experienced professional, in order to pursue justice. Turner was renowned for his discretion and efficacy, and he soon established himself as an indispensable ally. John's request was uncomplicated. Discover the reality of Lisa's relationship with her supervisor, Richard Evans, an affluent and influential industrialist who had recently relocated to the area. A disturbing image was disclosed by Turner's investigation. He possessed a reputation for both ruthlessness and grace. His business dealings were frequently shrouded in secrecy, and rumors of malfeasance followed him wherever he traveled. The investigator found that Lisa and Richard's relationship was more than just infidelity. They were profoundly entangled in a web of illicit activities and corruption. Richard's actions were not entirely ethical, and his influence permeated the community. John was appalled to discover that Lisa had not only betrayed him but had also exposed Emily to this perilous environment. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming, as Lisa's involvement with Richard had placed their daughter in danger. The final shock was the admission that Lisa had been involved in Richard's illicit activities. John experienced a profound sense of betrayal, not only from his wife but also from the entire world in which he had once placed his trust. John gathered evidence of Richard's illicit activities and Lisa's involvement in them with Turner's assistance. The evidence was damning, but the process was laborious. The final strike was delivered when John discovered that Lisa had exploited her access to Richard's resources to support his illicit activities, thereby implicating herself in a variety of criminal activities. John was motivated to take decisive action by his sense of justice and the desire for closure. He presented the evidence Turner had collected to law enforcement, and Richard Evans and Lisa Parker were promptly indicted on severe charges. Intense media coverage was provided to the case. John's name was infrequently referenced. His pursuit of retribution had been successful, however, the personal toll was substantial. Emily was left to navigate a world that had been irreparably altered, and his family was in ruins. John endeavored to dissociate himself from the turmoil as Lisa and Richard engaged in their legal disputes. He was compelled to reconstruct his existence, removing himself from the shadows of his past. He hoped that the wounds would eventually heal, despite the keen impact of betrayal. Little did he realize that this was merely the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that would challenge his fortitude and redefine his perceptions of forgiveness and family. The betrayal of his wife.
Lisa, and the revelation of her adultery with Richard Evans had upended John Parker's life 5 years ago. Although the wounds of his past were profoundly etched into his spirit, the passage of time had provided him with the opportunity to rebuild. John was employed as an independent consultant in civil engineering and had relocated to a small community that was vastly different from his previous existence. He had succeeded in establishing a veneer of normalcy, however. The specters of his past life continued to haunt him, occasionally infiltrating his thoughts. John's new existence was tranquil, in striking contrast to the chaos he had fled. The tranquility of the small town provided a respite from the fast-paced lifestyle of his previous life. He had relocated to a modest residence on the periphery of the city, where the silence was a source of solace rather than a void. His days were characterized by a consistent routine, which included working from home, occasionally engaging in social activities with new acquaintances, and seeking solace in the seclusion of his surroundings. However, the lingering sense of unresolved issues from his past continued to plague him, resulting in restless nights and transient recollections of sunnier times. On a brisk autumn afternoon, John was in his study, sifting through a pile of paperwork, when he heard a tapping on the door. It was unexpected, as he seldom received visitors. A young woman who appeared pallid and distraught was standing on his threshold when he opened the door. Her cranium was shaved, and her eyes were vacant, reflecting a combination of fear and resignation. John briefly failed to identify her. The woman spoke in a trembling voice. Dad John's heart skipped a beat as he immediately recognized her as Emily, his daughter. The sight of her in such a stark contrast to the vibrant teenager he had once known filled him with a combination of shock and profound sadness. John asked Emily, his voice barely a murmur, "What happened to you?" as Emily entered the residence. She hesitated in her movement. She was visibly disturbed, her body quivering as she sat down in a chair. John promptly prepared her a cup of tea, his hands trembling as he did so. He sat across from her, attempting to comprehend the magnitude of the situation. "It is a lengthy narrative." Emily's voice began to waver. "I had no idea where else to go. I had to leave." John listened intently as Emily recounted the last 5 years of her life. After John's abrupt departure, Lisa had struggled to cope with the consequences of her actions. Her legal troubles, coupled with the fallout from Richard's arrest, had plunged the family into chaos. With her own prospects dwindling and her finances strained, Lisa was forced to make increasingly desperate choices. Emily, now a teenager grappling with the loss of her family's stability, found herself adrift. Her mother's involvement with Richard's criminal activities had isolated them from their community and friends. As Lisa's financial situation worsened, she fell deeper into Richard's remaining network of corrupt associates. The influence of these individuals loomed large over their lives, casting a dark shadow over Emily's adolescence. In the midst of the turmoil, Emily had tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She excelled academically and clung to her music as an escape from the chaos. But as time passed, the pressure and the weight of her mother's decisions began to take a toll on her mental health. Lisa's erratic behavior and financial desperation led her to make a series of poor decisions, ultimately putting Emily in a dangerous position. Emily's voice grew softer as she spoke of a particularly harrowing period Mom got involved with some of Richard's old associates. They weren't just criminals. They were dangerous people. They threatened us, and when Mom couldn't pay them off, they took it out on me. John's heart sank as he listened to Emily's account of the abuse and manipulation she had endured. It was evident that Lisa's decisions had subjected Emily to a world of anguish that no child should ever have to endure. The specifics were both startling and devastating. Emily had been coerced into situations that left profound emotional wounds, and she had been subjected to psychological abuse and threats. Emily's mother, despite her initial intentions to safeguard her, was unable to protect her from the repercussions of her involvement with Richard's network. Emily disclosed that her life had further descended into chaos when she endeavored to flee the situation. Despite her successful departure from her mother's residence, she was not without repercussions. Her departure was a desperate act of self-preservation that compelled her to seek refuge in a variety of locations, moving on as soon as she felt secure. The turmoil she had experienced was evident in the soiled garments she wore. "I couldn't stay with Mom anymore," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "She kept telling me it would get better, but things just got worse. I had to leave to survive. I didn't know if you'd even want to see me. But I had nowhere else to go." John's heart ached as he took in Emily's words. He felt a surge of guilt and sorrow for not being there for her during those formative years. He had been so consumed by his own sense of betrayal and the quest for justice that he had failed to recognize the full impact of Lisa's actions on their daughter. "I'm so sorry," Emily, John said, his voice filled with emotion. "This was an event that I had never intended to occur," I thought. "I believed that my decision to depart was morally correct. I was unaware of the extent to which you were experiencing distress." Emily's expression was a blend of relief and persistent melancholy as she nodded. "Dad, it is not your fault. I simply needed to locate you. I was unsure of what else to do." John tenderly grasped Emily's hand. He could observe the vulnerability in her eyes and was aware that the process of re-establishing their relationship would be intricate and delicate. John experienced a sense of purpose for the first time in years, despite the fact that the road ahead would be long and replete with obstacles. He was resolute in his commitment to offer his daughter the love and support she required. "We should commence by ensuring that you are comfortable." John stood up and stated, "You are now secure in this location. We will collaborate to resolve the matter. You are not alone." John came to the realization that their journey was far from over as they began to discuss the next steps. Although the shadows of the past continued to linger, they were afforded the opportunity to establish a new course of action. The bond between father and daughter was a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, despite the fact that the wounds of betrayal and the remnants of old grievances would need to be addressed. The decision of John to adopt Emily is the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that will test their resilience and challenge their understanding of family, forgiveness, and redemption. They had both endured unimaginable adversities. However, they would unite to confront the relics of their past and endeavor to construct a future that was unencumbered by the shadows of their past. Emily's sudden return had irrevocably disrupted John Parker's tranquil existence. The tempest of emotions that John was unable to navigate was the result of the revelation of her suffering and the persistent shadows of his past. However, one thing became apparent in the midst of the chaos. He was compelled to safeguard his daughter and confront the relics of the dark world that had had such a profound influence on their lives. John concentrated on establishing a sense of normalcy for Emily in the weeks that followed her arrival. He enrolled her in a nearby secondary school and initiated the process of pursuing counseling for her emotional scars. Although the weight of their shared history hovered over them, their daily routine began to stabilize. John discovered comfort in minor victories, listening to her discuss her aspirations for the future. Despite the value of these moments of connection, they were insufficient to alleviate the pressing concerns that continued to loom over them. John was aware that Richard Evans' illicit network was far from being dismantled, despite the calm facade. Richard's associates had become increasingly despondent and perilous as a result of the aftermath of his arrest. Lisa's brief imprisonment had failed to deter Richard's associates from pursuing retribution or continuing their illicit activities. John was aware that safeguarding Emily necessitated confronting these persistent threats head-on. The tension in the air was palpable. One evening, while John and Emily were dining together, the telephone called. John's pulse pounded as he grasped the device, recognizing the caller ID. "Mark Turner," The private investigator who had previously assisted him was the individual in question. Mark's voice, which was typically composed and tranquil, was tinged with a sense of urgency. "John, we have an issue." Mark stated, "I have been monitoring Richard's associates, and it appears that they are preparing a significant event. I am concerned that they are focusing on you and Emily." John was struck by the news like a discharge of lightning. He had believed that by eliminating Richard from the equation, he would have achieved a degree of security. However, the remnants of Richard's network continued to pose a significant threat. "Are you certain about this?" John endeavored to maintain his voice as he inquired. Mark responded with a positive attitude, stating that I have been able to compile and inform others about their activities. They have been monitoring your movements in an effort to exact revenge. It is only a matter of time before they take action. John's thoughts were agitated as he endeavored to formulate a strategy. Confronting the threat directly was a hazardous endeavor, but he was aware that concealing was not an option. He had already encountered the catastrophic consequences of evading issues. This time, it was imperative that he assert himself. "Okay, Mark, what is your recommendation for our next steps?" John inquired with a firm voice. Mark's counsel was pragmatic. "Initially, it is imperative that you ensure the safety of Emily and the security of your residence. Security will be provided for you by a few of my acquaintances. In the interim, each individual investigates their strategies to determine whether we can surpass them." With Mark's strategy in motion, John initiated the process of fortifying his residence. He implemented additional security measures and adopted a low-profile approach, ensuring that he did not establish any patterns that could facilitate criminal surveillance. The tension persisted in spite of these measures. The house's creaks and the passing cars felt like potential threats. John and Emily were enjoying a peaceful evening at home when they heard a thunderous pounding on the door 1 week later. John's intuition was acutely attuned. He observed a visage that was familiar as he peered through the peephole. Mark Turner appeared disheveled and agitated. Mark announced, "John, we have an issue," as John opened the door. "They intend to execute their strategy tonight. It is imperative that we evacuate without delay." John was overcome with panic, but he managed to maintain his composure. "What is transpiring?" "Their strategy has been compromised." "I have reason to believe they're coming for you now, and they're not alone," Mark explained. "We don't have much time. Grab whatever you can and let's go." John quickly gathered a few essentials and made sure Emily was ready to leave. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he offered her a reassuring smile. "We'll be okay. Just stick with me." Mark led them to a secure location, the safe house arranged by his contacts. The place was a stark contrast to the familiarity of John's home, a well-fortified property on the outskirts of town, equipped with surveillance and defensive measures. John and Emily settled in, though the sense of security was tempered by the knowledge that they were still in danger. As night fell, Mark's contacts maintained a vigilant watch over the safe house. John, Emily, and Mark waited in anxious silence, their nerves frayed by the uncertainty of the situation. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity. Around midnight, the tranquility was shattered by the sound of shattering glass. The intruders had breached the perimeter. Mark's contacts sprang into action, engaging in a tense standoff with the attackers. John and Emily huddled together in a secure room, their hearts pounding as they heard the muffled sounds of confrontation outside. John's mind raced as he tried to stay calm for Emily's sake. He could hear the voices of the attackers, their threats, and demands mingling with the sounds of struggle. The safe house's security systems were holding, but it was clear that the situation was critical. After what felt like hours, the sounds of the confrontation began to fade. Mark's contacts managed to repel the attackers, but the ordeal was far from over. Mark entered the room, looking relieved but grim. "They're gone for now," Mark said, his voice taut with exhaustion. "But this isn't over. We need to find out who's behind this and ensure they're brought to justice." John and Emily were shaken but unharmed. The immediate danger had passed, but the events of the night underscored the gravity of their situation. John knew that their safety was precarious, and that they had to act decisively to put an end to the threats that loomed over them. In the days that followed, Mark intensified his investigation into Richard's associates. With the help of law enforcement, they were able to track down key members of the criminal network and gather evidence that would lead to their arrests. The effort was arduous, But the breakthrough came when they uncovered a crucial piece of information linking the remaining associates to a planned attack on the safe house. The final confrontation was swift and decisive. Law enforcement, acting on the evidence gathered, conducted a series of raids that dismantled the remaining elements of Richard's network. The arrests were highly publicized, and the criminal activities that had once threatened John and Emily's lives were brought to light. Lisa's legal troubles continued, but she was now a secondary concern compared to the dismantling of Richard's criminal empire. John's focus shifted to rebuilding his life with Emily, free from the immediate threat of violence. The ordeal had taken its toll on both father and daughter. They had faced unimaginable trials, but they emerged from the experience with a newfound strength and understanding. Their bond, tested by adversity, had been forged anew. John and Emily began to rebuild their lives, focusing on healing and moving forward. The scars of the past would always remain, but they had faced the darkness together and emerged into a brighter future. They found solace in each other's company and worked towards creating a life that honored their resilience and hope for a better tomorrow. The final stand had been more than just a battle against external threats. It had been a journey of rediscovery and redemption. John and Emily had reclaimed their lives from the shadows of their past and were determined to embrace the future with courage and optimism. The road ahead was uncertain, but they faced it together, united by their shared strength and unbreakable bond.